Slenderman's creation is credited to Eric Knudsen in 2009. But there are accounts that connect to Slenderman that existed hundreds of years before then. You can find stories in ancient folklore about a faceless, pale, thin man that would stalk children. And more recently, there's Men in Black. Men in black suits that look completely normal at first glance. You'd never notice them in a crowd. But if you do get a good look at one, you start to notice anomalies. And the longer you focus on them, the more anomalies you'll notice. Could Slenderman be one of these? His ability to be invisible to those he doesn't want to see him, and visible to those he does, might suggest that he and the Men in Black are using a similar cloaking method. But I'm off topic now, aren't I? This is about that night. The night I saw Slenderman.
Many people can tell when they're being watched. This sixth sense normally helps protect people. But what if a monster was able to use this defense mechanism against a person, driving them to madness? Tonight's cryptid has had many names. The Tall Man, the Thin Man, some call him the Operator. But most people today know him as the Slenderman.
It was 1996. I was 13 years old. It was late, and I was just laying in my bed thinking about baseball when my mind went completely blank. Now, to be fair, I was lying in bed. My mind going blank and me falling asleep was the entire point. But this was different. For starters, I wasn't tired. I felt very awake, but my mind was blank, as if I was tired. Another strange thing was the position I was in. I was on my back. I never slept on my back. Ever. And to make things even more bizarre, I have no idea how or when I switched from lying on my side to my back, but there I was. I began to notice movement in the corner of my room, and then I saw him emerge. Slenderman. He began slowly approaching me, but I didn't move. Not that I couldn't move. I didn't want to. Even though this tall, faceless thing from the shadows was walking towards me, I felt calm. When he got to the foot of my bed, he started stretching his arms out towards me. I should have wondered what he was going to do, or what he wanted, but I just didn't care. I just laid there, calmly, like it was all completely normal. He continued stretching his arms out at me when my mom walked in. For some crazy reason, my mom walking in scared me. All at once, I was covered in sweat and breathing heavily. She ran to me and asked what was wrong. She said she heard me screaming from down the hall. I told her I wasn't screaming and left it at that. I didn't want to tell her about anything I'd seen. Being covered in sweat and telling her I wasn't screaming, she decided to check my temperature, but it was fine, and I looked fine the last time I saw her just before bed. She watched me closely the next day. In the end, my mom decided it must have been the Doritos I ate while watching the baseball game on TV that night. Doritos causing random screaming and sweating in the middle of the night doesn't make much sense, but neither does what really happened. I was 18 years old when this happened. I was working as the art teacher at a sleepaway Christian camp. Because it was a Christian camp, you weren't allowed to date the other staff. If male and female staff were even seen standing too close together, one of the higher-ups would say something. The job lasted from June to August. 3 months. A very long time not to even sit next to a girl. There was, however, one way to get around this rule. A loophole. If you said you were cousins, no one bothered you. I'm not even sure how the loophole existed. By the end of the summer, it seemed everybody had a cousin working at the camp. I spoke to some of the staff that worked there previously, and they said it happens every year. Also, the boy unit leader and the girl unit leader were married and met at camp. Did they also pretend to be cousins at first? The entire thing was ridiculous, but there was a beautiful camp counselor named Hannah, and I asked her to be my camp cousin. It was hard to sync up breaks to see each other. Camp counselors were given 1 2-hour break a day and every other night off, but the only places you were allowed to go at night were common areas. The chapel, the pavilion, and the movie room. Your only opportunity to be alone was to meet up during the day and to walk to the archery range. It was really far from everything else. You had to walk through a path in the woods, then across a field, and then through more woods before you got to it. And if someone happened to find you, you could always say you and your cousin wanted to talk to the archery teacher. One night, Hannah's break overlapped with dinner. This was the chance we'd been waiting for. We figured we could walk to archery and make it back during dinner. No one would notice, and no one should be around because everyone's at dinner. At first I was really nervous, but the further we got from the mess hall, the more relaxed I got. By the time I could see the field from the woods, I was already holding her hand. We came to the edge of the woods, and all of a sudden I felt her squeeze my hand. I automatically think she must have seen someone, so I simultaneously tried to shake my hand free, prepare my alibi, and look for whoever was around. My hand was not getting free from her grip, and I didn't need my alibi. Standing in the field was what looked like a tall, thin man dressed in black. Everything about it was unnatural, from how tall it was to how thin it was, just everything. Thinking out loud, I say, "Do you think someone is building a scarecrow?" Before her and I could say anything else, it twisted its body to look at us. That thing, whatever it was, didn't have a face. We took off straight for dinner. The path that led back to the mess hall would bend here and there. We completely ignored the path and ran in a straight line through the woods. We were visibly rattled when we made it. The camp director asked what happened. We told him we were walking by the chapel and saw a 300-pound squirrel. It was the code we used for bear, so the children wouldn't get scared and panic. The maintenance guy went out and looked around the chapel, but obviously didn't find anything. It's not like I could tell them we were at the field together. For the rest of the summer, Hannah and I didn't even try to spend time alone together again.
Wow! You know, they say you'll find things where you least expect them. Kudos to Slenderman! I never thought of looking for him at Camp Jesus! Best hiding place ever! And speaking of the best, it's time for this week's top commenter! This week's top commenter has been a subscriber since before we had 300 subs, and is always up for making some trouble in the comments. She's a great horror babe! Taylor Ray! And her comment from the parody trailer for The Fast and the Furious reads, love this. So long as there's no killing of animals, it should be a hit. That's not just my bleeding heart speaking either. Statistically, people care a lot more about the animal being killed than humans in films. Maybe they all have bottled water guns, like you would use anyways. Get it? I definitely do get it, and that would be awesome. Maybe the cats can fight the dogs with rolled up newspapers, like they're sword fighting. That was fun to think about. Thank you so much for all your comments and support, Taylor. A few weeks later, after camp was over, and everyone went home, our friend started to go out and look for Slenderman. When his friends asked about what he was doing, he said, "At first I was afraid of him because he was so tall. But now I really look up to him."
The small town of White Bluff, Tennessee, has a population of under 4,000 people. On beautiful days, it's not unusual to hear visitors say the town's warmth and charm is reminiscent of a simpler time. And they're right. The town has an old soul. But at night, when the visitors leave and things get quiet, there's a legend about a terrible creature that's been haunting the town for 100 years. The White Screamer.
Hey, Super Horror fam! In case you didn't know, murders, monsters, and malicious spirits are only where the fun starts on Super Horror Show. If you haven't been watching Lunch Break, then you've been missing out on very important videos. Without Lunch Break, how will you find out about important topics like when to punch someone in the face? Can you tell if someone's a sex offender just by looking at them? Or about selling your soul to the devil? Don't miss out on this very educational content. Watch Lunch Break with Papa Bones. One of the first things something evil will do when trying to get to you is isolate you. Maybe that's why some of the creepiest stories come from small towns. The fewer people it would need to overwhelm, the better. So sit tight and pull your covers up while I tell you about a monster that's been haunting the same small town for 100 years.
According to legend, a family moved to the natural hollow in the woods of White Bluff. It was beautiful and peaceful, so they built themselves a home and started to work the land. From day one, things on the farm were strange. It's difficult to describe. Nothing outright terrible happened, but things didn't go the way you'd expect them to. It was like everything was resisting the farmer and his family. But at the end of the day, it was their home. They reasoned they would figure it all out soon enough. Maybe the plants would need more or less water in this area. Maybe the animals here just acted a little different. It was nothing the farmer couldn't figure out. They were convinced they would get it right. That is, until one night. That one night, the screaming started. They'd been in the bluff for a while now. The summer solstice passed. The days were getting shorter. The family sat down in their humble little home, ready to eat. The farmer lowered his head as he always did, and prepared to say grace. But before he could, a terrifying scream filled the air. things immediately descended into chaos. His daughter started crying. The farmer checked outside his cabin, but didn't see the source of the screaming. By morning, the screaming stopped. The farmer and his wife told their daughters some animal was probably being killed and was in pain. But that night, it happened again. It didn't stop. Night after night, it was always the same. The sun would go down, and the screaming would start. One night, the farmer couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his gun and took off into the night, looking for the source of the screaming. The screaming sounded like it was coming from everywhere. He couldn't tell if it was one scream being echoed through the hollow, or if it was multiple screams coming from different directions. He started following the scream that was the loudest. It led him to a bush. The farmer readied his gun and approached the bush. But when he got there was nothing. And all at once, the screaming stopped. The farmer was terrified. He held his breath so he could listen closely. Suddenly, the sounds of screams filled the air. But this time, it wasn't the horrible scream that he'd been hearing every night. It was something far worse. He heard his wife and daughters screaming out in pain. He raced back to his house. When he got back to his property, the screaming had stopped. By the time he reached his house, it was already too late. His wife and daughters were cut up. Pieces of them were everywhere. To this day, residents of White Bluff say the White Screamer can be heard, screaming around the hollow, haunting White Bluff.
What the devil? Nice town, my butt! Sounds great! Welcome to White Bluff. You gotta try one of Sharon's cherry pies on Main Street. It'll make you slap your mama. Oh, by the way, there's one teeny tiny little thing you maybe should know about. Sometimes this homicidal creature starts screaming at night, and well, one time it tore an entire family to bits. But that was a long time ago, so no need to worry about it. And, yeah, you go on down to Main Street and have yourself a big old piece of pie. Crazy. But you know what isn't crazy? This week's top commenter. This week's top commenter is Mark Asquith, and his comment reads, "Small following, but amazing content. This channel is sure to get a sizable following. Please keep the stories coming." Thanks, Mark. I read this one extra loud so YouTube would hear it. And don't worry, I'll definitely continue putting out the best scary stories I can find. Thanks for the comment, Mark. Every comment helps tell YouTube that my videos aren't trash, so I appreciate every one. I might need to find someone to do some PR for me. Maybe that would work. I wonder who does PR for the White Screamer. They must be amazing. who hears that story and thinks, the screaming, that's the most valuable part of this story. Personally, I would have went with whites cut you up into tiny little pieces when no one is looking. That way all that important information is up front. Well, until next week, don't fall to pieces. I'm back! Okay, I might not be 100% yet, Super Horror Fam, but I missed this chair, and this fire, these creepy stories, and most of all of you. Because it's my first day back, I figured I'd share a true subscriber story today. I have some incredible true scary subscriber stories to share. I call this story Cold.
Years ago, my husband and I lived a mile deep in the woods. Our state had a terrible snow and ice storm, and we were without power for several days. The temps were in the 20s, and the storm took down some trees, blocking us in. After the 5th night, the temps in the house were almost freezing. We were sitting in silence, staring at the candles. Suddenly, we both heard several people singing. And both at the same time asked, "Do you hear that?" It got louder and louder until they were right outside the house. We didn't move. It was frightening. We couldn't recognize the language they were singing in. And then, it suddenly stopped. When it was light out, my husband checked for footprints and found nothing. We had no idea what it was.
Oh man, that story chilled me to the bone! It's strange how time changes how you feel about things. Years later, Sandy and her husband were talking about how scary it really was to be trapped there, when her husband admitted he kind of wished he could go back. Sandy looked at him and said, "Do you want to die of hypothermia?" And he replied, "No, I just want to look cool." You ever think about where some cryptids get their names? Like the Jersey Devil. Why is he called that? Were they worried he would be confused with the New York Devil? Or the Texas Devil? Or the California Devil? Tonight we take a look at the Jersey Devil, born in the 1700s, but still said to haunt the woods till this day.
The legend of the Jersey Devil. The legend begins in the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey, back in 1735. Mother Leeds learned that she was pregnant with her 13th child. She was poor, and her husband was often drunk, and no help to her and her 12 children. So when she discovered she was pregnant again, in a moment of exhaustion and frustration, she cried out, "Let this one be a devil!" A few months later, on a stormy fall night, Mother Leeds went into labor. She was brought into a separate room from her family by the midwives and had what seemed to be a normal delivery. She had a baby boy, but a few minutes later, the baby started to transform into a terrifying creature with long, sharp claws and bat-like wings. It screamed out a blood-curdling cry as it attacked Mother Leeds, killing her and one of the midwives. It then broke into the room with the father and the children, attacking as many as it could before taking off up the chimney and flying into the dense forests of the Pine Barrens. Later, sightings of this creature were reported in the area and continue even to this day. People report hearing screaming in the woods and seeing a strange creature some claim is the Jersey Devil. One man thought the Jersey Devil was just a silly legend until one day in 1989. I was camping with a couple of friends in the Pine Barrens. One morning, me and my friend Tim got up early and decided to go hike one of the trails before the others woke up. While we were walking, we heard this terrible shrieking scream. It sounded like an animal was being killed. We looked around and didn't see anything, so we decided to keep walking. About 15 minutes later, we could see something up ahead in the distance, between the trees. It was very dark brown, maybe black. It looked taller than a man, but looked human-like. It had wings on its back, big wings, and it was hunched over something. We didn't move. I was worried it would notice us. That's when its head popped up. It knew we were there. My hands were both shivering and sweating. The creature then stood up and took off. We were freaked out and ran back to camp and told the other guys what we saw. They said they could hear the scream too. We quickly packed up and left. I don't know about the other guys, but I haven't been back to the Pine Barrens, and probably never will. Sightings of a strange creature continue in the area to this day.
Oh man, I would have gotten out of there too. Did you see that thing? He's got a face only a mother Jersey Devil could love. Later on that same day, a group of teens set up camp at the same spot. The Jersey Devil was very hungry and waited till it was night to eat them. Well, when it was night, the Jersey Devil went to the camp. The teens got spooked and were hiding under their covers.
The Jersey Devil ripped into the tent, quickly took a large bite out of one of the teen's covers, and immediately left. He said he didn't want any more because it tasted like sheet!